the NHL, maybe a little bit of Elon Musk. Man, I love having this guy on. He's been the face of poker for at least the last 2 decades. Always great having real kid poker, Daniel Negreanu, joining us on the line. Daniel, thanks so much for coming on, my man. It's been a little while. How you doing?
It's a pleasure. I heard your description when you were leaving your last guest, and you said that I was not a controversial figure in poker. And boy, that's a bad read. That's a bluff. Oh, in poker, I say what I believe, and that's not always popular. So
listen, there are always going to be some idiots out there that are going to say, "Oh, you shouldn't have slammed this down after you lost a hand," and I can't believe you. But I wouldn't really call. Listen, the people that think you're controversial are snowflakes. I really don't know what else to say, Daniel.
fair enough. I agree.
So I want to ask you this. Correct me if I'm wrong. You're playing in the World Poker Tour at the Win, right? Last week, and you're deep, right? There's what, maybe 2 tables left, I think. And correct me if I'm wrong. You have pocket deuces and you flop a set. Sorry, you have to relive this hand. And then guy has pocket kings, all the money's in. He hits a 2-outer on the river. Do I have that right?
Basically, yeah, it was a really great tournament. The World Poker Tour Championship. They had three. They made a $15 million guarantee on it, and they doubled it. They had almost 3,000 players. It was a really big one. And to get through 3,000 players is very difficult. It's
Yep.
day 6, and I was able to get down to the final 17. Found myself in a spot where I'm over 95% or so to have like 23 million in chips. But that's why we play the game. Sometimes you can make all the right decisions, and card comes that you don't want to come.
I want to ask you about that. As a professional, you being the true professional of poker, how do you deal with that? It is part of being a professional gambler, right? It's part of being a professional poker player. You deal with it all the time. When you make the right play, and as you said, you're 95% to win a hand and you lose, and it's not like it's a cash game where you can just rebuy. You've been playing in this for days, right? 4 or 5 days. And then in just one moment, you get really unlucky and you're done. As a professional, what is that ride home like for you? And how do you deal with that mentally?
Yeah, so it really depends on the moment and when it happens in a lot of ways. Like sometimes it's more emotional than others, right? If you get knocked out early in a tournament, oh well, you were never really emotionally invested in it. But when you grind 5 straight days through 3,000 players and you're there, 4 million for first, and you're one card away and you can just feel it and taste it, then it's like a punch in the stomach. Me, my process typically, I allow myself to internally vent a little bit, play the victim, for a little while so that I just experience the experience. And then I'm able to move past that, and I don't pretend like it didn't affect me. I see a lot of guys, they think that this holier than thou, I am a Buddhist, nothing affects me. It's BS. Okay. It stings, let it sting. And then once it stings, once you've experienced it, then you can move past it. And the next day I wake up ready to do it all over again.
If you go through something like that, an hour later, would you play in a big cash game if you felt like you had an advantage, or do you just need to take like a day, or how does that work for you when you take a bad beat like that?
Well, the bad beat doesn't keep me away from the table. In this case, what would is I just played for 5 straight days. Like I'm on fumes. We're exhausted. We're going to be playing till the last day was going to go from noon till about 6 a.m. So that so that's like the focus is just that, like after I'm out of a tournament like that, I'm on the couch where I'm at right now, and I don't move for about a day or two.
Last question about that. I guess I want you to give advice to the novice poker player out there. We have bad beats in life, right? We all deal with difficult things in life. And I guess I shouldn't call a poker hand life, but in some aspects it is. You get unlucky in life, you get unlucky in a hand, you do things right in life. Things don't always turn out the way you want them to. What advice would you give a poker player, or just in general, when you're really unlucky? Maybe you take a really bad beat, could be a tournament, could be a cash game. What advice would Danny Negreanu, arguably the best poker player in the world for the last 20 years, what would you say to those people?
Well, yeah, it's a great question because you can answer this both for life and poker. But first of all, you have to access your resilience, right? When you play poker, this is going to happen in life. Bad things are going to happen too. What defines you and your success is how you deal with those things, right? In some cases, the best approach is to look back at the hand, look back at the scenario, and ask yourself, okay, was there anything to learn here? Did I make a mistake? Was this possibly me? Could I have done something differently? And in some cases, no. So you just have to learn to sort of understand that, that's just sort of part of the game. If you did make mistakes, right? That's a beautiful thing because now you can actually look at it and say, okay, I'm going to learn something from this so that next time I don't make the same mistake, right? And then essentially not learning anything from mistakes is the mistake. Anytime you have a breakdown in life or things don't go well, ask yourself, what worked and what didn't work. right? Do more of what worked and maybe less of what's not working and what didn't work.
I think that's awesome advice. Do you have something in your a moment in your poker career that you just cannot get over? I'm sure this is a hand that you can definitely get over eventually, right? But I mean, you've been doing this for such a long time. Is there that one moment in your poker career where you say to yourself, "This is something I can never get over"?
No, because if I did, I would have had to quit, right? So resilience is super important. There are moments I look back, man. In the year 2000, I was 11 left in the World Series Poker main event, and I played an ace king against a pair of sixes, which is basically what we call a coin flip. I lost that hand, and that one stings because I maybe would have done something different today. But yeah, you're going to have lots of moments like that. If you've played poker as long as I have, almost 30 years, there's gonna be a lot of like, oh, almosts, a bracelet here, one card away. Like, oh, there's a whole bunch of these moments, right? But the thing about the human brain, which is unfortunate, is we typically remember the negative, most traumatic things more so than we do like the good things that have happened,
Sure.
right? Similar to social media, like when you post something, right? You see 80 great comments, you see one bad one. What does the brain tend to focus on? Well, we tend to focus on the bad one, go, who's this jerk? He doesn't think this. But meanwhile, 80 people said, great job, good for you. And one guy said something bad. And guess what? What you end up finding is people engage with the negativity because, that's the one that stings.
You are so right. It's kind of like Daniel Wright being at the blackjack table and you say, "Oh, that guy took my card," and then you lose the hand and you blame them, but you don't remember the last 20 times where maybe the guy took your card and you still won the hand, right?
Yep. Good analogy for sure.
Yeah. All right. Let's get into some other topics that I haven't really talked to you about in a long time besides poker. I'm sure you're at times sick of talking about poker. Let's talk a little bit about Elon Musk. I want to get your thoughts on social media. You are a prominent figure on Twitter. You have a ton of followers, and rightfully so. People care about what you have to say, as do I. That's why I love having you on the show. What do you make of Twitter? What do you make of Elon Musk? In a sense, he's censoring some conservatives now. I'm sure you heard the story of the kid that was monitoring his private jet. He took him off of Twitter. He's doing the exact thing that wasn't he calling the same stuff out a couple months ago. What are your thoughts on what's going on with Twitter?
So I think this Elon Musk stuff is like a perfect example of sort of the despair of tribalism that we've created, right? So Elon Musk is now a figure where like, oh, okay, so if you're liberal, you just have to hate him, and if you're on the right, you have to embrace him. This is the rule? Like, so we have to just decide. How about we look at someone like an Elon Musk and we realize this is a very complex individual, right? He brought us electric vehicles. He brought us Starlink. He brought us potentially Neuralink, which was going to help people who are paralyzed. So there's a lot of value he's brought to the world, right? Just his existence and what he's been able to get across. That doesn't mean he can't also be a jerk on Twitter and an idiot and some guy who's like an absolute troll. He can be both things, right? We're all complex. We all have, good parts of who we are and bad. And when I look at a human being, I ask, what is their overall contribution? Is it beneficial or not? And someone like Elon Musk, like you think of a guy like him and like he has the potential to move us forward in civilization. I don't agree with everything he says. I don't agree with his views on the population control and all this sort of stuff and whatnot. But like the bottom line is, I think, he has value, right? As far as like what he wants to do with Twitter, I think he did uncover in a lot of transparency with the Twitter files and stuff like that. A lot of what was going on at Twitter is broken. It was broken. This company was losing $4 million a day, had 400 project managers when you need like 3. They've fired like 70% of their staff working just the same, so there was a lot of indulgence and overspending. You had matcha teas, you had yoga rooms, you had nobody really working, right? So from an efficiency standpoint, this was a Titanic ready to sink. So he's come in now stuck with it because he bought it for 44 billion. Oops, without really being able to find out what was under the hood. And when he did, he's like, oh, shiznit, I'm in trouble. So
Do you find it interesting, though, Daniel, that he's at the World Cup? I'm sure you saw this video and the pictures with Jared Kushner and a bunch of the Saudis that apparently put up a lot of money investing into Twitter. And then in that same 24-hour period, he puts up a poll that says, hey, do you think I should still be, running Twitter? If not, I'll step down. Do you find that to be interesting? And do you think maybe the Saudis don't want him running Twitter?
I don't think it has anything to do with the Saudis. I think it has to do with like him sort of getting a pulse on, what's happened to him, right? So this guy, like if you think about it, he was supposed to be the darling of the left. This is the guy who climate change, I built electric cars, we're going to put, gas and oil out of commission, but they hate him, right? They just absolutely hate him. So now he's like, well, who now, all of a sudden he's like, well, screw them. The other side sort of embraces me, but it's not as though, and I remember he put up a sort of a tweet a while ago, but like his political leanings of all were here. And then both extremes sort of extended. to the left and the right. And so it sort of moved him more, one way or the other. But I think I think he's bitter and upset that he's, getting such negative flack. I think he was offended for sure when Joe Biden had a summit for electrical vehicles and stuff like that and didn't invite Elon, who was sort of the innovator of it and one of the first one to get it going. So I think a lot of his lashing out and the childish behavior is part and parcel because of sort of how he's become kind of a hated figure by so many who don't really know the guy. They just see his tweets, and some of them are childish and stupid.
You're right. Because of who you are, Daniel, you've met a lot of prominent people in your life, particularly the last 25 years or so, a lot of billionaires. You've played poker against a lot of extremely wealthy people. Is it just me, or it seems to me a lot of these billionaires, they're just different? I mean, talk to me about that. They're just a different breed of people.
Well, no question there is. And this is partly like when people sort of question oh, Elon Musk, he's not a genius. He's just had other people do stuff for him. I'm like, okay, well, isn't that part and parcel what genius is? To be able to create things that no one else in the world ever has. So I have friends that are pretty friendly with Elon, that are billionaires, David Sachs and Jason Calacanis's and, Chamaths of the world that, hang out and, with Phil Hellmuth and whatever. And yeah, I mean, they think, so here's the thing, when you accumulate so much in your life in one aspect, it can lead to Dunning-Kruger. Dunning-Kruger, for those that don't know what that is a belief that is because I'm so smart at one thing that I can sort of be smart at everything, right? And poker players suffer from this in a major way. Because if you become a great poker player, you figure out, well, I can solve all the world problems, Right. And that's not always the case. However, having said that, people that do get to that place, they do have a track record of problem solving. They do have a track record of being able to do things that nobody else has done. Now, being a billionaire doesn't mean that you're just smarter than everybody else. It isn't this, you're not a super genius just because you've accumulated money. But if you were able to tackle issues and create and do things in a way that nobody else has ever done before, well, there's some genius in that, right? And so people that have a track record like that, and Elon has a pretty good one in that regard. So, everyone's rooting for Twitter to fail on the left. I want it to succeed, right? Yeah. I think I hope that it's better. I hope moderation is better. I think the community notes idea is fantastic. Anytime, a prominent figure puts out a post about COVID or whatever, let's have underneath the actual facts on both sides, right? And then maybe Twitter can be a trusted source of news more so than some other places that people get it.
I feel like Twitter at times is a cesspool of negativity. And I feel I think we would probably agree on this. You shouldn't be allowed to incite violence, right? You shouldn't be allowed to call, swear at people or use vulgarities or things of that nature. I guess my question to you is, where do you draw the line? I don't want to see medical misinformation. I mean, I almost died of COVID 2 years ago. There's a lot of people that'll say millions of people have died from the vaccines and those sorts of things. What you're saying is put the facts underneath it. Do you think those people should be censored? Where do you draw the line, Daniel?
Absolutely not. So Birdwatch has already been around, but now they're going to call it community notes because he thought Birdwatch was wrong. But if you look back, some of the times the people are being censored or they were shadow banned, it was completely inappropriate. There was one professor who basically wrote a piece about the potential harm of the lockdowns on children, right? On their mental health.
Right.
And, internally in Twitter, they're like, we don't like this, right? This is not good. So they shadow banned him. And I think shadow banning is the worst offense because if you want to ban somebody for stuff that they write, let them know. So then they can choose to continue to do that or not. But don't just hide them on the site. Let them know the reasons why. But the idea that I don't think we should censor anyone per se. Obviously, like you said, I think inciting violence or hate speech, stuff that Kanye's done or whatever, that's off limits. But people having a view that, hey, maybe COVID was created in a lab, right? Maybe. You can't even discuss that. That's not even something that you can discuss. Maybe there's two genders and maybe non-binary is not real. If you say this publicly, are you censored because it doesn't align with the ideological view of the majority? We need this. This is what colleges and universities used to be about. Discussing intricate issues that you can no longer talk about anymore. Because if you don't toe the line as a professor or anything else, and you raise these controversial topics, you get axed. You get so much pressure from people, from these kids who now feel like, I was triggered. I have a right to fire this man because he said something I don't agree with. Yeah. Right.
So Daniel, I agree with you, but this is my anger or frustration with some conservatives out there. They want to talk about freedom of speech, right? But what some of these people don't understand, or maybe fail to understand, is that only pertains to the government, right? Twitter is a private business. If you don't like Elon Musk and you don't like what he's doing, the guy owns Twitter. He should be allowed to do what he wants to, right? For the most part. Same thing before Elon Musk owned Twitter. These are private businesses. And yet conservatives want to talk about, oh, freedom of speech. They're taking my freedom of speech, right? That doesn't pertain to private business, right?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I do think that, there is fair criticism of what Twitter was doing because listen, they said shadow banning wasn't happening. They lied, right? They flat out said, we don't do this, and they do this, right? So yeah, obviously it's their company. They can choose to run it however they want. They can ban whoever they want. They can create whatever rules in this playground that they want. And if people don't like it, they can find a new playground. I saw a really good thread about this and that, like Twitter really doesn't have to be the only one ultimately, right? The internet is a vast space of different places where people can discuss things, right? If you don't like Twitter, go to another place, create your own thing or whatever. And, and if it offends you so much and play in a playground that plays on rules that you're comfortable with. But you're right in that, like, if you say things on Twitter and I run Twitter and I don't like it, I can ban you. Period. Right? You have that right. Now, that doesn't mean that it's right or wrong to do so. Like, and I do think that, censoring some of the voices that were questioning the vaccine and all this sort of stuff, like, the Hunter Biden story, as you mentioned, suppressing all this stuff, you shouldn't do all that. You just shouldn't, like, you should just leave that alone. Let it get out there, but do what they're doing now, which is in community notes, say, by the way, this is false information, here's why, and provide the links below. And do this equally and unequivocally for all information. And then what we get is less actual misinformation being spread. We get more accurate information being spread. You still have people spreading misinformation, but sometimes, A, it's not, and B, sometimes they don't know it's misinformation. They actually believe it to be true, right? So when you can tell people this is misinformation, well, prove me wrong. Let's have the community notes decide.
I want to talk to you about some controversial figures that have also used to have, at least in Kanye West, prominent Twitter accounts and platforms. What do you make of this era? The Kyrie Irving stuff was crazy too. I was just talking to Joe Tsai. He was in town last week, the owner of the Nets, about this. What do you make of some of these people that are the anti-Semitic comments, Hitler-loving comments that Kanye West has made, and these huge platforms that they have? What do you make of this era and what some of these people are saying and doing?
It's incredibly sad because today the rabbit hole goes so deep. And ultimately, the rabbit hole always ends up in the same place, unfortunately. And it has for, hundreds of years. And the rabbit hole ends up with, like, blame the Jews for everything, right? They end up being the root of it. So people go down these YouTube rabbit holes, watch this silly movie where it's actually the black people that were the real Hebrews and all this sort of confusion and whatnot. And a lot of people in despair. And generally speaking, people that are prone to sort of conspiracy theories that are outlandish deal with some sort of mental health issues. And we know that Kanye is bipolar, right? He is. He says he's not now, but he's definitely bipolar. And so someone like him is incredibly susceptible to this sort of stuff. You look at Kylie Irving, he bought into the whole flat earth stuff. How did that happen? He went on YouTube and whatever, and he found all these videos like, oh, wow, look at what they're hiding, or whatever. And you can make very convincing cases. Like if you looked at 2000 Mules, this story about, the voting, and it's like, if you hear the music, dun, 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 and all this stuff, and it's released, like you watch and you think it's true, but then you're like, if you actually fact check it, it's complete BS. It's like absolutely baloney.
Yeah. Not only that, but the Dinesh D'Souza, the guy who made that film, is a felon, by the way.
Right, but it does. So it doesn't even matter that it's true or not. If it comes in a compelling package and you go down that rabbit hole, it's unfortunate. I know too many people that were somewhat normal, and during COVID, during lockdowns, they went down some of these rabbit holes and they're not recovered, and
that's a good point. I know people, Daniel, that were absolutely radicalized during COVID. They've been radicalized. Do you know people like that as well? I mean, my former co-host, I believe, was radicalized. Do you believe that you have people in your inner circles that have been radicalized the last several years?
Absolutely. And listen, what they don't even realize, a lot of them, is a lot of it came from sort of the QAnon conspiracy, which, some of that leaked to this idea, the pizza gates and whatever else there are, these like conspiracy theories and things like that. But lots of people, like, once you go down that rabbit hole, and the danger too with social media in general is most of these algorithms, whether it's Instagram, TikTok, or, Twitter to a certain degree, will continue to give you things that push you further down that rabbit hole. I watched a really great piece on 60 Minutes of a young 11-year-old girl who started on Instagram. She was just looking for fitness videos. Fitness videos led to dieting tips. Dieting tips led to skinny girl videos. Skinny girl videos led to pro anorexia videos. And this is an 11-year-old child, right? And that's what the algorithm did. And what's really sad and unfortunate is these social media companies can stop it. They can stop that from happening. They choose not to in a lot of ways in the name of profit and keeping eyeballs there, right? and, at the risk of our children. And there's a big lawsuit. A couple of these families, one of them was a 12-year-old girl who hung herself. She learned how to hang herself on Instagram, right? Like, this stuff needs to, and there was a video teaching people how to do it, and it was up for like a year,
That's
right? So
terrible.
they have to do a really good job of policing, and they have to do it not, they have to do it because it's what's right for humanity.
Right.
You
I
can still
agree.
make a tidy profit, but also understand that we need to protect our children. And in fairness to Elon Musk, he's done, I think it was 44 or 50,000 accounts that were involved in like human trafficking, slavery, trading, that he's eliminated, right? The question is, why wasn't that already done? Right?
A
Why is
very
this?
good question.
You're policing this guy who wrote a piece about COVID lockdowns. You're policing people who have theories that maybe the COVID came from a lab, but you're allowing this? Like, focus where it matters, people.
Yeah,
Let's
no, I
go.
agree. I that's unfortunate, and yeah, I agree with everything you said there. If you're just joining us, Real Kid Poker, Daniel Negreanu, talking about issues in the world, right? Social media. Here's something we haven't talked about in a while, and that is VGK Hockey. So, Daniel, I know you go to most of the games. I was at the game the other day. I'm going to the game tonight. What do you make of the fact? I guess this is a loaded question, but what do you make of the fact that the Vegas Golden Knights are not winning games at home, but yet they have this amazing record on the road, and they're struggling to score goals at home, even though they had a pretty good game the other day against a bad Arizona team? What do you make of this team struggling to score goals at the Fortress?
Well, yeah, it's been sort of a weird anomaly, and it's sort of, I feel like it's, over the last couple seasons, we started out, way above average at home. We won every game, basically the first two seasons. We just won
Right.
every game at home, and I think like some of that home ice advantages wore off. I mean, I don't know that the crowds are as energetic as maybe they once were, and I don't know that people don't, we don't have the Vegas flu issue anymore, where people fly in like they're professionals. They're gonna, gear up to play against Vegas. I think, the bigger issue here for Vegas is once again injuries, right? Jack Eichel, when he's out of the lineup, that really hurts your offense. Shea Theodore out of the lineup. Alex Pietrangelo obviously dealing with an issue with his child, out for a little while, and now you have Marchessault out tonight. So when you're throwing in a bunch of these, like, because the bottom six is really problematic from a goal scoring perspective, we just don't have, like, overall. I think, and this is the same. This has been true since season one, basically. The third line is continually and has always been lacking in identity. We don't know what the hell it is. The fourth line, we've always had a fourth line. All right, they go out there, whether it's Reeves, Nosek, Carrier, Wall. There's always been a fourth line. You've got the misfit line, you got the top line, but what is the third line? It's sort of a hodgepodge. You got
Yeah.
Phil Kessel on there, sort of in no man's land, playing with Amadio or Lecision or Ronberg or whatever, and really difficult to create what that is. And I hear Bruce Cassidy in his post games often mention that. He's like, we don't know what we have here, and we got to sort of figure it out. But the problem with the third, this is the problem that I thought about with this team, is lack of depth, right? When you lose an Eichel, you lose a Theodore, you lose these guys, like, you don't have, really good offensive players that you can sort of fill in those roles.
I agree with you. And boy, it was pretty scary last week, right? We saw Stone go down, and we thought, oh my God, did he tear his Achilles? What happened? And then he's back on a shift 5 minutes later. But you got to worry about some of these guys too with their health. You mentioned Marchessault being, he's a younger, but you mentioned some of these guys, and you don't want some of these key guys getting hurt. You need Stoney out there. Pietrangelo, obviously, with the situation with his daughter. Last I heard, his daughter's doing much better. Thank goodness for that. But yeah, I mean, I think the goaltending has been pretty solid, right? I think you would agree with me on that. Logan Thompson's been pretty good in net. Our backup also has a great record. They both have been good, and I think you have to be happy from a goaltending standpoint, right?
Yeah, like here's the thing. Bruce Cassidy flat out said before he came, he's like, my system is goalie friendly, and it is. They play a zone defense, right? So that means that there's always D-men in front of the net. In the past we played sort of a man-to-man, and one of the knocks on Vegas was loose pucks and second chance opportunities, making it really difficult on Fleury or Lehner or whoever was in the net, right? And cleaning that up has been really, really big for them. One of the downsides of it, of course, is you end up in your own zone a lot more often, because if you're not chasing after the puck to go get it, you're waiting for them to take a shot from the outside or whatever. They often will have possession for longer periods of time, which can lead to some fatigue on the back end and whatnot. But overall, I like the system. I think it makes sense, especially because you have very young goalies. Both are pretty close to the same age, Aiden Hill and Logan Thompson, and both are performing. I mean, by all measures, you have to say, above expectation, no question.
Are you back to being, and is it fair to call you a VGK super fan, or that no, you're never going back there? Like, how do you feel right now in general about the organization? Because we've all had our frustrations. I know you've had yours. How do you feel about VGK right now? And are you still, I know you're a Canucks fan at heart, but, or Toronto, right? I'm sorry, Toronto. But are you a VGK super fan again? Or is that
Here's the
label
thing.
not there?
I am just a massive hockey fan. I mean, if
Yeah,
you saw how much time I spent on hockey and fantasy and just watching all the games, it's pretty ridiculous how much I love the game and watching the game. Obviously, internally within the organization, I'm not a fan. I've never been really of Kelly McCrimmon in the way in which, they've handled past employees and stuff like that. I root for Phil Kessel. Like if Phil wasn't there, and I know he's struggling and I know he's had some defensive lapses playing on the wing the other night. And it's like, oh my God, he's getting the heat. He's getting the heat. Come on, Phil, step it up. So I root for him, and I root for the players more so than I do. Like, listen, I want them to win. I want them to succeed, but
Mhm.
I don't have that same passion that I did in like season in that San Jose game when I was like literally having a nervous breakdown. When they scored 3 goals and I
We
was
all were.
all
Yeah.
tied up. I don't do this, but like because my wife, whatever she knows about this, I don't shake and do this stuff and have breathing problems. I don't. I did that game. I was like literally textbook dealing with anxiety in that game, and since again, like I feel like you know um we've taken a turn in terms of the way in which we're viewed. Like the rest of the league wants us to fail now, and they used to really root for us. We were the new kid on the
Mhm.
block.
Yeah. I want to, if you can give poker fans an update. I saw on your social media, you and E-Dog, Eric Lindgren, you're at a, looked great, by the way, sushi restaurant, right? Downtown Summerlin. The food looked pretty darn good. Um, I know Eric Lindgren. He paid my way into the main event back in 2009. The only time I ever played in the World Series of Poker. I've always known him as to be a really good dude, and I know you're really close to him. You guys have been friends for a long time. Can you give me an update on Eric? Because I know, he had some gambling issues in the past, and I know you don't speak for him. How is he doing these days, and what is he up to these days?
Yeah, E-Dog's a great guy. I mean, obviously, listen, we all make mistakes, and he's made plenty, in the gambling realm. But before I get there, the restaurant, I want to give it a shout out because it's unbelievable. It's called Jing, Jing. Really, like full menu. I had the best sake I've ever had in my life. Unbelievable. It was an expensive bottle of sake. It was a limited edition thing, but it was the best sake I've ever had. And I'm a vegan, right? But I like to go to places where they can have a wide variety of food. It's a sushi place with all that stuff with an incredibly great vegan menu as well. Like fantastic, top
Wow.
of the night.
How much was the bill, if you don't mind me asking?
The bill was well, the wine, the sake was 1,200 for one bottle,
Oh my God.
but the rest of the bill was much cheaper than that.
1,200 for sake. Oh my
And
God.
that was a deal. They gave me a deal. It was a $2,000 bottle, I think.
Oh, really? They gave you a deal. Wow, how nice of them.
It was
Oh,
unbelievable. It was well worth it, every drop. But as
that
for E-Dog, he's doing well. He's got kids, so he's a dad now, so he's not, as prominent on the tour, living in San Diego, just trying to be a good dad and, rectify some of the financial issues that he had. And I think like since, there was a period where, he filed, bankruptcy and, things didn't go well for him. But I think like a lot of people, like with you, for example, him putting you in the main event, he helped so many people. He gave so many people opportunities. And then issues happened with the company that he worked with, and the gravy train stopped coming in, and all of a sudden, there's no more money, and people are like, "Well, where's mine? I don't have it." This isn't a Bernie Madoff case. There was no intention to rob and steal people. He just made some mistakes, and wasn't able to, overcome, some of the, he had like some of the gambling issues that he had.
I'm glad he's doing better, by the way. But what happened to Howard Lederer, Annie Duke? I know Ferguson plays still. Whatever happened to Lederer and Duke and all of them and anybody that was associated with Full Tilt? Because most of these people aren't around anymore, right?
Well, we haven't seen Chris Ferguson in a couple of years. He did come back to play for about a year and a half. Howard Lederer played one or two in the last 5 years and then just sort of disappeared. Annie Duke is outside of poker. She's sort of rebranded herself as like this motivational speaker who does speaking events I think she's married some billionaire guy or whatever like that. She's completely ostracized from poker. Like people in poker have no time for her. And people are actually in poker get really upset when they see mainstream people talk about her in this positive light. And you're like, do you realize the scams that she was involved in? So it's interesting how, you were able to do that. She's completely out of poker, as are most of the people from that era that, they're not regulars anymore. There's a new generation of people and me still, because, I'll be here forever.
I know you will. Well, Daniel, when you if you ever retire from poker, which I'm not sure you should or will, you should be a political talk show host. I'm telling you, man.
We do a show together.
That would be fun. You and me doing a show together would be a lot of fun. Danny, it's always a pleasure, my man. Thank you so much. And take it easy on the sake, okay?
I was so good, though. My God.
It looked good when you put the pictures up, the video on social media. I'm like, man, that food looks really, really good. But hey, I want you and your family, your wife. I hope you guys have a great Christmas, have a great holiday, my friend. And are you going to the game tonight, by the way?
Looking at possibly, most likely.
All right. Well, if you're there, I'll stop by and I'll say hello. Danny, it's always a pleasure having you on, my man. You're always one of my favorite guests, and I appreciate you. Maybe we'll see you tonight. Have a good one, Daniel. Thanks for the time.
Take care, bud.
Take care. Daniel Negreanu, everybody. Real Kid Poker. See, that's what I love about having this guy on. I love it because we could talk about anything. I could talk for hours with this guy because he's so smart. Not that I'm Mr. Albert Einstein. That's not what I'm saying. But